Well, hello and welcome once again to Beat the Reset. My name is Tim and I am the guy in the hat. And today I wanted to talk to you about something that was termed the crime of 1873. I recently posted a video on Instagram relating to this exact topic, but it is such an important issue and something we have long since forgotten about, something that the world hasn't spoken about for a very, very long time, and I believe it is so important and so critical to the monetary systems and what has happened to the monetary systems of the world that we live in today. So I want to take you back to 1873. For many people, when it comes to the history of monetary systems, a lot of people wonder why it is we bother going backwards in time. I mean, shouldn't we be looking to the future? Shouldn't we be talking about the digital currencies and central bank digital currencies and Project M-Bridge and the MX technologies of the central banks and digital twin cities and all of these things? But the truth is, in order to understand where we are going, sometimes it is critical to understand where it was we have come from. And this is really where I want to start today, because the most important, in my opinion, the most important of all monetary trading commodities is physical silver, far beyond physical gold for a number of reasons. One, its incredible ability to operate at something called the retail level. It is more of a consumable, much, much more of a middle class trading system. And since that most of the trade is middle class on this planet, then it stands to reason that that is the obvious trading mechanism to use. It is commoditized throughout the 19th century, and long before the 19th century we had silver. In fact, we had silver in our coinage right up until 1968 in the United States, when, of course, it was finally taken out of circulation. But silver has been part of our coinage forever. These days, of course, we trade base metal coinage, so things like zinc and copper and these base metal alloys that really, they do have value, but they have value in enormous quantities. So it's been a long time since we've used commoditized coinage within the currencies. So let's go back a little bit to understand really what has happened here. I'm going to take you very quickly back to the Spanish Empire. Now, why on earth would you go there, Mr. Guy in the Hat? Why would we start back, in the 13th and 14th centuries? And the reason is because this is where we really saw some of the most successful trade empires. So the Spanish Empire, and really there have been many. I mean, we can talk about all sorts of trading empires, the Egyptian, the Roman, but really if we go to one of the more recent examples, the Spanish Empire, and we have a look at the currency, it was a commoditized currency known as specie. This is a word that we don't even use anymore, and specie was real money. This is not fiat, in other words, by decree of governments. This is real monetary systems. These are the real monetary systems of global trade. And in the Spanish Empire, the fundamental coin that was, or the currency that was used, was the Spanish silver dollar, one of the most successful trading dollars at around about 25.5 to 26 grams of silver, fine silver. So these are real monetary systems, something of value for something of value, using silver in place of barter systems. I mean, our most basic form of trade is barter, where you swap goods and exchange goods, but silver at 26 grams, now of course troy ounces 31.1 grams, cooking ounces 28.3. So 25.5, 26 grams of silver in a commoditized coin is not too shabby. So this is the way the Spanish Empire traded. And the Spanish silver dollar was rarely changed in value throughout its 400-year reign as the Spanish silver dollar because it was such a stable commodity. There was no fiat currency, central banks. This was really just a trading mechanism, a one-for-one trading mechanism. However, the Spanish silver dollar was split into 8 parts known as royals, and from time to time we saw it even split into 10 parts. So sometimes you would see a modification to the value of silver for the purposes of adjusting trade balances and so on. But for most of the time, if throughout its 400-year reign as the Spanish silver dollar, silver rarely changed value. And the gold coinage was the doubloon, and at that time, there were 4-to-1 ratio, 4 silver dollars to 1 doubloon, which is a little bit like saying there is each Spanish silver dollar was 25 cents. If a doubloon was worth $1, then the Spanish silver dollar was trading at 25 cents, 4-to-1. So if we jump forward to really where a lot of the problem started was in the first coinage act of what they call the American Republic in 1792 under George Washington. We saw in the United States this deliberate move to start the early debasement of the most valuable trading asset of the common man, which is silver. And we saw that in the first coinage act of the United States, when the Coinage Act was first incepted in 1792, there was no coinage. The mint didn't have anything to coin. There was no actual US dollar at that point. In fact, there wouldn't be right up until 1798-ish, somewhere around there, which meant that even though the United States wanted to take over as the global superpower, they couldn't do it without having an actual monetary system. So they had to work out a way to essentially take the power away from the Spanish. Well, of course, this took a number of years to do, and eventually the United States would actually achieve that. However, in their early coinage acts, it was interesting to see that the Spanish silver dollar was immediately debased from 4-to-1 in the Spanish Empire to 15-to-1 in the United States. So straight away, the Spanish silver dollar has lost a huge amounts of its value straight away in the American Republic. And then what we saw is by the time the United States reached 1834, so that was just 40 or so years later, we saw that silver was debased deliberately in the Coinage Act of 1834. Again, this is another attack on silver, and this is really important to know that silver was under constant fire. And it was changed to 16-to-1 trading ratio, and what that meant is that silver started to disappear off to Europe and places that paid higher prices for silver. So, of course, this caused eventually something known as a silver shortage in the United States. And to add insult to injury, in 1857, in the Coinage Act of 1857, the United States government decided to get rid of the Spanish silver dollar out of circulation altogether. So since 1798 or so, in fact throughout its entire history, the United States had been trading on the Spanish silver dollar, and it wasn't until 1857 that the United States government and the Treasury decided it's time to get rid of the Spanish silver dollar, and we're going to, of course, get the common man to start using a more localized trading currency. So fortunately, the United States had its own silver dollar, which was a slightly lower gram than the Spanish silver dollar. So even though it had $1 face value, much the same as the Spanish silver dollar, it actually had less silver in it. So the common man, every time he traded it, was getting a little bit ripped off each time. Now, of course, that was 1857. We get to 1861, and all of a sudden there's a massive silver shortage. The government claims that this is because the price of silver overseas was fetching a better value, so US dollars were disappearing off the mainland and, of course, overseas. It was also largely due to the fact that a large portion of the coinage was not able to be used because the Spanish silver dollar was no longer in circulation. Of course, we go into the American Civil War, and of course the first thing you see, war times are always great for things like new inventions and making modifications to law under emergency acts and things like that. And we saw that Abraham Lincoln, on behalf of the Treasury, introduced the greenbacks, which of course were to replace silver. So you can see more debasement of silver, more annihilation of the common man as pieces of paper are given to the common man in the form of greenbacks. Then 3 or 4 years into the war, by 1864, the United States released its Coinage Act once again, a new Coinage Act of 1864. We've got a copper coinage for the first time. So there you go. In just 4 short years from 1861 to 1864, we see silver disappearing out of circulation. We see Abraham Lincoln and the Treasury issuing greenbacks, which are pieces of paper that are printed and meant to replace the silver that the common man once owned. And then we see further debasement as copper coinage is introduced to make up for the shortfall. So there's a vast difference between copper as a commodity and silver as a commodity. There's a vast difference in the value. 1865, of course, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Also, it was the end of the American Civil War, and we started to see from 1865 leading up to 1873, that 8-year period, was this incredible shift away from silver. An obvious global, alliance formed in Europe, in the UK, in Japan, in South America, in France. There was this huge alliance and agreement, global handshake agreement, to get rid of the bimetallic standard. The bimetallic standard saw silver and gold trading in ratio against one another, but what the globe seemed to want is something called monometallism, which is the move away from at least one of the metals. And because of the way that debt was growing on the globe, one of these assets had to go according to the elite systems. So the one that was put on the chopping block was silver. And of course, this made perfect sense from an elite's perspective because it solved a lot of problems. First of all, debts could be exonerated in gold coin only, and that was the point. So debts and taxes were payable only in gold coin. So what on earth was the common man going to do? Because he didn't own gold coin, he owned silver. Now, of course, in the crime of 1873, also known as the Coinage Act of 1873, the greatest crime and was unleashed on mankind, and that was, of course, the banning of the minting of silver coins. That is it's absolutely catastrophic. Its effect and impact on the common man would take decades and decades. It makes to resolve. It makes 1933 and the confiscation of gold look like a child's playbook. So here we had a situation where silver was largely banned. That would be the better way to say it. Debts and taxes were payable only in gold coinage. And again, this is horrific for the common man and again caused major, major problems. By 1893, we saw a Silver Purchase Act and the attempt to restabilise the economy with silver because that was 20 years after the crime of 1873. And of course, gold was not able, didn't have enough, there wasn't enough gold in the system to settle the debts and taxes. So gold started to fail. It brought silver back into the equation, of course, and everything seemed to run in 20-year cycles. That was the curious thing through the 19th century. All the collapses were 20-year cycles. The coinage acts were roughly 20 years apart. Everything seemed to run in 20-year cycles. So from 1873 to 1893, gold prevailed. It wasn't a gold standard. It was a monometallic standard. That was the best way to describe it, or quasi-gold standard as it's sometimes called. Then in 1893, in the early 1893, we saw the rise of the Morgan dollar, which was a silver dollar, and of course we started to see the mints starting to pump out silver dollars yet again because of course debt was not able to be exonerated using gold alone. Now of course this led to the Gold Reserve Act, the Gold Standard Act I should say, of 1900 in the United States, and then that opened the doorway for the rise of a central bank for the purposes of exonerating debt and relinquishing debt and taxes and so on. So we saw this Federal Reserve rise, of course, under the Federal Reserve Act on December 23rd, 1913. Various elites involved, of course, in the creation of that central bank at Jekyll Island and many. There's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I highly recommend people read just on that specific topic. But of course, what this central bank largely was doing is printing dollars, fiat dollars. The dollars were convertible at that time to silver and gold, but that all ended in 1933, of course, under the confiscation on April the 5th, 1933. So it took the Federal Reserve 20 years to destroy its own paper currency completely and the value of that currency. So silver, of course, remained in circulation, as I said, right up until 1968. In fact, the United States, after the confiscation of gold and the banning of gold eventually in the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, put the United States onto a very, very sure-footed silver standard for the first time. So the United States was on a silver standard right up until 1968, despite the world believing that the US dollar was pegged to gold since 1944. It was, but gold, of course, couldn't be traded or owned on the ground by the common man. So what was the point? There was no convertibility. So it was a wholesale gold standard only, whereas silver was fully convertible and you could use your fiat certificates to trade for silver. Silver is, and the point of this podcast today is to tell you, silver is the most important trading commodity on the planet. It is still to this day. It reached its highest point at $50 US an ounce in 1980. It has continued to be suppressed using what we call paper versions of silver. It's suppressed by about 400 to 1 at the moment. It trades at about 80 to 1 as of today against gold, when it used to trade at 4 to 1 against gold in the Spanish Empire. So it's been horrifically debased. It always has been, it always will be, but it's the number one trading asset of the common man, in my opinion. So you buy it, and never stop buying it. That is it for me. The Guy in the Hat. Just thought I'd give you a quick education on how important silver is and why it was suppressed and why it will continue to be, but you need to own it. That is it for me, Guy in the Hat. Wishing you all the best. Of course, hope you are enjoying these podcasts. Hope you're looking after your friends and your family and your loved ones. Hope you're looking after your health. And as always, make good choices.